Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the earnings call of Equitas Small Finance Bank Limited's financial performance for Q4 and full year of FY21. We have with us today Mr. P.N. Vasudevan, MD and CEO, Mr. Sridharan N., CFO, Mr. Murali Vaidyanathan, President and Country Head, Branch Banking, Liabilities, Product and Wealth, Mr. Rohit Phadke, President and Head Retail Assets, Mr. Ram Subramanian, Head Corporate and MSE Banking, Mr. Jagdish J., Head Inclusive Banking, Mr. Natarajan N., EVP Treasury, Mr. Dheeraj M., Head Strategy and IR, Mr. Rahul R., AVP Strategy and IR, and Ms. Srimati Raghunathan, CFO, Equitas Holdings Limited. As a reminder, all participant lines will be in the listen-only mode, and there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions after the presentation concludes. Should you need assistance during the conference call, please signal an operator by pressing star then 0 on your touchtone phone. Please note that this conference is being recorded. I would now like to hand the conference over to Mr. P.N. Vasudevan. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you and welcome to this conference call of Equitas Small Finance Bank. I hope all of you and your families are safe as the second wave is creating havoc across the nation. At the bank, the second wave is also causing a severe amount of damage to our staff. We have about 230 employees who have recovered, but we still have nearly 469 employees who continue to battle the virus, of which 29 are currently hospitalized. And very sad to state that we have seen 4 of our colleagues succumbing to the virus. Middle of last quarter, our branches are showing signs of returning to normalcy, but with the rise in infections, we are struggling to keep some of the branches operational now. We are just praying and hoping that it will get quickly behind us. To tide over the pandemic, we are working very closely with the health authorities to ensure that all our staff and family members are vaccinated, in addition to providing necessary financial and healthcare benefits. The bank has also rolled out measures to support our frontline workers during the crisis. Now we'll move on to the business operations. We had a reasonably good quarter as collections and disbursements continue to pick up across the product segments. In particular, our vehicle finance portfolio, which has done better than our initial assessment. On the liabilities front, the team has done an excellent job across all indicators, be it retail growth, client deepening, fee income, digital traction, branch productivity. We are seeing a very good traction. We have tried to provide this perspective on slide number 4 in the presentation. Moving on to our asset quality, it has held well as of now, and not taking into account the potential impact of the second wave. Credit cost of 2.26% and NNPA of 1.52% have been in line with what had been guided during the year, even though we had extended the moratorium benefit to as much as 98% of our clients by numbers for the first moratorium period. Also, we have seen a month-on-month uptick in collection with X bucket or repayment from our non-delinquent customer returning to the pre-COVID levels. But however, with the fresh lockdowns and restrictions being announced across the various parts of the country, and the ambiguity of what impact it will have on our customer segments, guidance for the current year looks quite difficult to make at this point in time. On the provisions front, we had increased the prudential provisioning standards during the last year, in fact in December, significantly more than the regulatory required level. Accordingly, we have a total prudential provisioning of 307 crores, which is required as per regulatory provisions, but we carry an overall provision of 460 crores, which leaves us with an extra of 153 crore above the regulatory requirement. Including the floating provision, we have a provision coverage ratio of 58.59% as of March 31st, 2021. Based on how the first quarter pans out, we look at further increase in provision as may be felt prudent from our end. We'll continue to be upfront in recognizing any possible stress and taking steps in advance. And I do hope to see the things settling down as quickly as possible. In terms of the quarterly performance, as indicated in the last call, in Q4, we continued our focus on collections. In March 21, the X-bucket collection across all products improved further. This means that we are not seeing any additional stress building up on a monthly basis. As of March, our advance grew 17% year-on-year, and about 81% is secured loans. Our flagship product, small business loan, continues to show used car advance crossed 120 crore, which we launched in the last financial year. MSE Finance, which we started post-conversion to a bank, continues to do well and now contributes 7% of our overall book. In terms of our liability franchise, we acquired 4.76 lakh liability accounts in FY21 as compared to 1.59 lakhs in FY20, which is almost like a 3 times or a 300% jump. This was largely led by our multiple digital initiatives, improved productivity, and a very strong leadership. Deposits grew 58% year-on-year, savings account grew 174%, and 45% quarter-on-quarter. CASA at 5,614 crores was at 34% as a CASA ratio compared to 20% in the beginning of the year. Our focus on digital banking continues. We have set up a separate business unit and focus will be on partnering with neobanks, collaboration with fintech programs, building digital assets and digital payments, and digital transaction banking. And apart from this, we will also focus on internal digitization projects for process and capability, efficiency enhancements. Thank you so much for hearing me out patiently. We'll be happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now begin the question and answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may press star and 1 on their touchtone telephone. If you wish to remove yourself from the question queue, you may press star and 2. Participants are requested to use handsets while asking a question. Ladies and gentlemen, we will wait for a moment while the question queue assembles. The first question is from the line of Amit Nanavati from Nomura Securities. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to check on the microfinance part. At least I see that you've written off of your MFI book, and yet the gross NPA reduction is more or less around 180 basis point odd, and around 6% is sitting still in more than par 30. So just wanted to get your initial assessment of what could be the eventual write-off, largely from wave 1, and then again wave 2, how large the problem can be, at least whatever initial assessment you can share.
I'll ask Rohit, our retail asset head, to answer that.
Yeah.
So usually what happens in the microfinance book is, anything about 30 plus is supposed to be at risk. But fortunately, in the last quarter, we've seen a new trend emerging. See, for the first time in the 1 to 30 buckets, our resolution was about 80%. In the 30 to 60 buckets, our resolution was about 6%. And about 60 to 90 buckets, our resolution was about 50%. So this is a new trend that we are emerging. So we feel that, as we go ahead, we will be able to recover a lot of the book which is lying in that 6% plus 30 plus which you mentioned. This is really a new trend. We have never seen this before, but the last quarter we've seen this trend, and I think it's been very surprising and we're very comfortable about it.
Understood. But can you share what is the flow-through number for from par 30 to 60 to 60 to 90 and 60 to 90 to beyond 90? Because you've written off, but still we've not seen a meaningful reduction in NPA there, right? So you have a 300 odd basis point accretion as well.
So see, if my collection was itself 65%, my flow through was 30%, isn't it? If my in the first bucket, if my collection was 80%, then my flow through was only 20%.
Understood. And any initial assessment that you can share in terms of both in terms of your inability to go on the street and collect because of some bit of impairment in your collection infrastructure because of COVID, and also any initial assessment of what behavior from a customer perspective is?
To be very honest, it is too early to give guidance on. It is too early to give guidance on what will happen because of the COVID restrictions. One, because COVID restrictions this year are not as uniform as they were last year. Last year, everything was locked down and it was very clear that, nothing would move. This time, the restrictions are very fluid and different in different regions. So it's very early because half of April we did not have restrictions and half of April we have clamped down restrictions at most of the places. So to be very honest, very early to give you any guidance on what will happen in the future.
Understood. Yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Jay Mundra from B&K Securities. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi sir. Thanks for the opportunity. So the first question is on CASA. Now we have done a phenomenal job on CASA and we seem to have got the strategy, product and probably acceptance also. If you can share the aspiration level for CASA over the maybe 12 months or 18 months. That is question number one. Okay.
See, thank you for your question. And as you rightly said, the trajectory is encouraging. Hi, I'm Murli here. I take care of liabilities and branch banking. So as I was saying, the trajectory is good. NTB, which is coming in form of digital and phygital mode, seems to be very good. Our segmented focus has yielded it. But giving a 12-month and 18-month period should not be a forward-looking, guidance. So what I can say is, are we doing right things? Yes. In terms of getting number of customers in, we have started clocking 40 to 50,000 accounts a month. Is it sustainable? Yes. Do we want to scale up? Of course, yes. Similarly, on the existing book, are we getting the relationship management and virtual management piece right and getting the deepening right? Yes. So we will continue to keep this retail focus on and CASA drive on. From 34%, we need to stabilize here before we propel to the next level.
Sure. And there's all of this improvement in QOQ basis also, right, from 25% to 34% is more or less structural, right? There's no one-off kind of a thing.
Correct. As we have mentioned here, now what we have done consciously is we have reduced the bulk deposit. If you see the book in Q3 to Q4, we have shed our cholesterol out by taking 1,100 crore out, and we got the right muscles in form of CASA and RTD. So it's a conscious decision of growing retail by curtailing bulk TD. So it's a broad-based. Structurally, it is helped us to bring down the costing also, and it enhanced the transaction also.
Sure. The next question is around asset quality. Now, we have shared a good detail on asset quality in terms of X bucket collection and the overall collection. So if I understand it correctly, then 99% of the customer by value, right, who were zero DPD at the beginning of the period, they continue to remain zero DPD, right? That is what the X bucket collection efficiency is. So is there a grace period that you offer? So let's say all these guys which may have paid in the next 10, 15, 7, 10, 15, whatever grace period, is that included here? And secondly, now the rest, the bucket itself, which I believe is 10, 11% by value are zero DPD. So is that a worrying sign that 10, 11% of the book is chronic stress? They were there is the customer which was standard, they remain standard, but the customer which were delaying payment, they still continue to delay payment. Of course, the situation is not that great. The macro situation is not that great, but is the understanding right?
See, the X bucket, as you rightly said, people who are not having an overdue at the beginning of the month and end up paying their EMI through the month. So that represents X bucket, correct? And you talked of some grace period. I really didn't understand what that is, because there is nothing like a grace period in a term loan. There's a certain EMI date fixed and they need to pay that. But X bucket is calculated based on the month-end collection. So if somebody was supposed to pay on, let's say, 10th of the month, and he ends up paying that EMI on, say, 20th of the month, he still gets counted as a person who was paid during that month. So that's how it is calculated. And as far as the other part that you are asking for, in terms of 10-11% who are chronic cases and all that, if you look at the same page 21, we have given you the billing efficiency of March 21. Okay, billing efficiency, we have explained it in the bottom by saying that it represents EMIs of March alone collected as a percentage of March month total EMI, and March month total EMI includes EMIs of accounts which are in NPA also, and not just standard assets. So that is at least our definition of billing efficiency. So what it means is that for the month of March, the denominator consists of the billing of all live accounts, including NPA accounts. Numerator consists of only those who are paid, March EMI, not anything pertaining to February or Jan or anything like that, only March. So that is, you can see it is 91.12 at the bank level. What that means is 9% of the customers have not paid their EMIs of March, correct? And out of that 9%, 3.6% of the customers are in NPA, right? So if you remove 3.6 out of 9, that gives you 5.4% of customers who are in, who have not paid their March EMI, but they are not in NPA. They are maybe in some lower bucket, overdue position. So that's what it means. I hope that's clear, or is there any other further clarification?
No. So most of this is clear. It's just that, sir, do you suspect that this 5-6% people who are delaying payment, or they are in 30-90 bucket, are they the same people which were there in the December? Because it looks like this bucket is more or less same bucket. Is that the understanding right?
See, in December we have given you, December 2020, the billing efficiency was 88.73. That has moved to 91.12. So basically it has moved up by about 2.5-3%. It has moved up. So that means that more people have started paying in the OD bucket also. But yes, you are right. So we have 5.4% of customers who are in some OD bucket and who have not paid. So maybe he's in the first bucket. By not paying, he has moved into the second bucket or something like that. But he is not NPA, which means that he has probably paid better in the earlier months, and so he's basically not an NPA, but he is in some OD bucket. Right. And these numbers are very, very comfortable. I mean, these are our pre-COVID levels. These numbers represent our pre-COVID levels, so it's very much business as usual at this level.
Right. And the last data keeping question, sir, if you have the RWA number and Tier 1 absolute number. Thank you. Tier 1 absolute.
You have it, you tell him, otherwise you tell him.
That's okay. Tier 1 is 23.23%.
This is Sridharan here. We have the Tier 1 capital 3,150.78 crores and Tier 2 128.60 crores. So the total capital is 3,279.38 crores. And the percentage-wise, Tier 1 is 23.23 and Tier 2 is 0.95%, totaling to 24.18%.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of S. Parmeshwaran from Jefferies. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Prakhar. Sir, I just wanted to your perspective that in the context of, the impact in the business, borrowers probably having some impact on the cash flows, etc., maybe sporadic, not evenly spread out, and your experience with the previous forbearances like moratoriums, restructuring, etc. If you need to offer some sort of a support to your borrowers, what would you prefer? Is a moratorium a better approach? Is restructuring a better approach? Just your thoughts, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So, the effect on cash flow of customers because of the wave 2, as Rohit mentioned earlier, it's very early and really not, we are not really in a position to associate or give a commentary on that at this point in time. But clearly it looks like there will be some impact. I think that's fairly clear. So the first quarter, I think it's going to have an impact. Second quarter, how strong it will come back, we have to wait and see. And from a regulatory support for such kind of customers, what kind of support we think that may be most useful, that's something at the SOB industry level, we have been discussing that in our association, and we've also been, giving our feedback, continuously to RBI in terms of our ground level feedback. So what looks like is, if we get an option to both give a moratorium or a reschedulement customer-wise, I think that may be the best solution. Because unlike the last year was a uniform impact on everybody because the whole country just locked down. So it was a uniform impact on everyone. Today it is not like that. It is varying impact on different people in different areas. So we may probably, if RBI probably comes up with an option to either reschedule or give a moratorium on a very customized basis. For example, I can give a 3 months moratorium to somebody and I can give a 6 months moratorium to somebody, and I may not have to give any moratorium to somebody else because it's totally not impacted. So that way a customized approach may be better this year simply because the impact of all this wave 2 is not unique. It's different. So let's see what the regulators come up with, but something like that may be probably in our view very useful.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Renish Harishbhai Bhuva from ICICI Securities. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi sir, and congrats on a great set of numbers. So just first question is on the staff cost. Okay, so it has been trending up since we have.
Sorry to interrupt, Renish, we would request you to please speak a little louder.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, so sir, congrats on great set of numbers. So first question is on our staff cost. So it has been trending up. Towards the 7% since when we revised the rate, and is now at around 6.5. So, is it fair to assume that staff costs have picked out at the current level? It is almost converged with the peak rate, or do you see there could be a further increase in the staff cost maybe in Q1, Q2 as well?
This is Sridharan. If you look at the employee expenses, the staff cost, which is 205 in Q3 and Q4 204, it's almost looks stable actually. And even if you look at the number of employees, it is around 16,000. It has moved to 16,556. Normally, the joinees in the first quarter, for example in Q3, it will have an impact on the next quarter Q4. So only to that extent there will be an impact. And we do not see much this variation on the employee cost.
Thank you for the answer. But sir, I think there was a slight confusion. So I was referring to the saving account cost, and I was referring to the SA cost.
Sorry.
Yeah. So what I will just repeat my question. So what I was referring to is that from last 2-3 quarters the SA cost has been trending upwards. So maybe converging towards the 7% peak rate, and we are already at 6.5%. So do you feel that maybe in first half also the SA cost will continue to inch up, or you feel SA cost at current level has picked out?
Hi, Murali here. So, first you need to understand, last year we had up to 1 lakh, 3.5%, and greater than 1 lakh, 7%. This was the product laddering.
Yeah.
Now, what it has gotten is everyone up to 1 lakh will get 3.5%. Incremental above 1 lakh people will get, for the incremental money, 7%. This is how product laddering works. So, now what we need to see in this, the most important part is, two things. One is our number of intake of customers have gone up, and seeing that to control the bulk money, now we have divided this year into up to retail, that is 2 crore, it is 7%, and greater than 2 crore already it has moved down to 6%. So this will start discouraging bulk money coming into the SA. So that factorization has already happened. And number two, the number of people who are aspiring to build 7% has gone up significantly. Now that is given us the biggest edge at this point of time. So if you go back to earlier times, it was at that bucket it was 8.23, which has come down to 7.42. So when SA was at normal pace, everybody was at 6 to 7 to 8, and now it has come down from 7.77 of quarter 4 20 to 7.20. So it will continue to remain at 6.5 to 6.3 buckets, because bulk is discouraged already in our factorization. So greater than 2 crores we have already moved to 6%. So our focus is to get retail SA. Our focus is to get the middle class plus, that is HNI and ultra HNI. That's why our high variant trajectory is up. So it will continue to dwindle above 2 crores in terms of costing. Up to 2 crores it will remain the same. If you factor it, you will gain over a period of 20 bits on the reduced side.
Got it. So maybe the let's say downward trajectory will take some time, but in terms of the blended SA cost, it is fair to assume that it will stick at current level, and there will be no further increase from the current mix.
Correct.
Okay, got it, sir. Okay. Now my next question is to Vasu. So maybe sir, if you can throw some light, on the April collection. So we have seen the March collection trending up well and holding up well. But if you can throw some light, the initial feedback from on the ground level, what is happening on the April collection will be helpful, sir.
As I said, it's extremely difficult to give you a guidance on what exactly will happen in the future. On April, the first 15 days, if you were normal, the next 15 days, all restrictions have happened. But usually what happens is your collections after 31st March pick up only slightly later. So April might not see a great impact, but there will be an impact. And as far as going forward, what will happen, I really cannot say, because it will depend on post-May 2nd, what happens. I mean, whether there will be a full lockdown, whether there will be partial lockdown. So it's very difficult this time, because as Vasu sir explained, it's not uniform across. It's very different in different areas. So at this point in time, to be very honest, I cannot really tell you what will be the impact, but there will definitely be some impact.
No, fair enough, sir. So just last the clarification, on the provisioning side. In slide one of the slides we have said that we are having this 150 crore of around that number as a management outlay provision. So that has included while calculating NPA provision or not? It is over and above NPA provision.
Yeah. See, I would like to explain the total thing. See, normally the bank follows IRAC norms, and the IRAC norms allows only the provision against the specific NPA loans, and also we are allowed to create otherwise floating provision. Any additional provision which you would like to create, that has to be made account-wise, and it has to be consistently followed. In fact, we made extra provision last year, starting onwards, based on the COVID package announced by the Reserve Bank of India, and around 100 crores we made the provision. So far, in March 20 we made 100 crores, and thereafter we made 71 crores in Q1 and Q2. So far, no, the RBI has not come out with any special provision package for the second wave, and we will make provision in Q1 in case RBI announces any such package, or based on how the collection happens in Q1, we will make our provisions accordingly. If you go back, no, actually in the introductory speech, Mr. Vasudevan said, in Q3, that is in December 20, the bank had accelerated the provision at various bucket levels, and that is, we feel that was good enough to take care of the provision. In fact, the PCR, no, from 45%, no, it has gone to 59% from last year to this year.
Correct. So again, sorry for repeating the same thing again. So what I'm saying is, at our net NPA number of 1.52%, is that 153 crore is deducted from gross NPA while arriving at 1.52, or this is sitting aside as a floating provision as on date?
No, it is not a floating provision. It is deducted actually.
Okay.
The extra provision or management overlay, which Mr. Vasudevan said, that has been deducted for this.
Okay. So it is there in the PCR of 49.
Yes, it is already included in the PCR.
Got it.
Even the 19 crore floating provision is included in the PCR.
Got it, sir. I think that's helpful.
See, the only way we can make a provision which will not be included in PCR will be whenever RBI comes with a special scheme. Like last year, they came with a special COVID provision scheme under which banks are permitted to hold a general provision, not against any specific asset, but at the entire pool level. They allowed us to make a provision. And so most of us made that COVID provision, which was not part of PCR. But that was only for a one-time permission given by RBI. So no bank, as of under our IRAC norms, we can't create a provision which is not part of PCR and not account-wise, unless there's a specific scheme given by RBI.
Got it, sir. Thank you for the explanation, sir. Thank you so much. That's it from my side.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Anand Ladda from HDFC Mutual Fund. Please go ahead.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Go ahead. Please go ahead.
Sir, just wanted to have your view on net interest margin. This quarter, it has declined. Certainly, there was some runoff in that. But as you see for those runoff, how do you see the trend in net interest margin? So this is specifically in the light of the fact that the MFI book, which used to be around 23-24% of the loan book, has been declining, and now it has declined to 18% of the loan book. So if the MFI proportion keep on declining, will it have an impact on the margin structurally? That's from my side.
Hi, this is Dheeraj here. Our NIM, if we remove all the one-off, ideally trends in line with the portfolio composition. And in that, as you had mentioned, MFI actually has a fairly high sensitivity to our NIMs. So as our MFI contribution has been coming down and now it is sub 20%, you are seeing that impact on the yield on advances, which is roughly about 25 basis points. And so far we have been able to offset it with the corresponding reduction in cost of funds. So bearing that sensitivity, the NIM is fairly stable. But as you know, last year was not a year where MFI could really go back to normal levels of disbursements, and which is why even from an advances growth, it looked very weak. But barring whatever outlook we have for the second wave, if business had returned back to normal, our MFI disbursements would have picked up to a much higher level than what it was last year. And that would have again kept the NIMs a little more sticky. So I hope I've been able to tell you the sensitivity around NIMs. And since we are not giving any guidance or taking that into consideration, I won't be able to tell you where the NIMs may trend, but there is a sensitivity which is mostly linked with the MFI contribution. On the rest of the products, the portfolio yield is fairly stable. So at a product-wise, our yields have continued to remain stable, just that the composition has yielded to this reduction in NIM.
And in fact, our yield, mostly it is a fixed rate book?
Yes, mostly it is fixed.
Okay. And lastly, if I look at an operating cost to income ratio, it has been trending down. Do we still believe that it has space to decline, or our cost growth will be lower than the revenue growth?
We've always had given certain milestones of cost to income where we want to take it as a bank, and we had said that in the mid 50s to early 50s is where we had kept our a milestone. But we at that point in time had not factored this first wave, second wave, and this pandemic. So if everything returns back to normal from a business model, we should start seeing cost to income trend closer to the early 50s. But other than that, this is actually the very wrong time to give guidance. But that's how the business model is built.
Perfect. Thank you. That's so much.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Nidesh Jain from Investec. Please go ahead.
Thanks for the opportunity, sir. So firstly, on the microfinance, if I look at in this quarter, we have written off almost 5% of the book. And despite that, our billing collection efficiency is 91%. Our PAR numbers have not improved. If I just add 5% in each PAR bucket, the PAR numbers would have been worse off versus December 20 data. While we have been consistently getting feedback on the ground that Q4 has been good, and your commentary also has been there that Q4 has been a good quarter, but actually the underlying asset quality in microfinance has deteriorated quite a bit in this quarter. Is that a right way to look at?
Hi Nidesh, Dheeraj here. Just before I give it to Rohit, so the write-offs happen in the end of the year. So the billing efficiency will not reflect that. If we had done the write-offs in the beginning of the quarter, then obviously the billing and collection efficiency would reflect that, and it would have been higher. So that's one. So the other one I'll give it to Rohit in terms of.
But in PAR data, the write-offs are reflected, right?
Yeah, correct. But in billing efficiency, no.
Okay, sure.
Hi, Hitesh, Rohit here. To add to that, if you look at the same page, you look at the X bucket collection efficiency. The X bucket collection efficiency in microfinance has been at 98.7%. So that's coming back to normal. That's pretty good. Also, see, there's a slight difference when you look at microfinance. There's a slight difference between what happened earlier, what happened now. See, earlier, 30 plus was at risk because those customers were intentionally, or they had genuine problems, so they just disappeared. They were delinquent customers. See, now, in the last 1 year, what has happened is it is circumstances which have, prevented customers from paying up. That's a big difference between what used to happen earlier and what happened last year. And that is why I said that for the first time, we are seeing a good resolution in 1 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 to 90. And that gives us a lot of confidence that, we should be able to do some decent collections here, unlike, the trend which was exhibited in the earlier portfolios.
Sure. Despite all those resolutions, actually our PAR data has not improved versus December 20. That's the only probably the feedback that I have. Because we are talking about resolution, but if you look at PAR 30, if I add 5% there, it has become 11.5% versus 9.5 as of December 20.
So if you look at the billing efficiency in December 20 and March 20, it has slightly improved from 19.12 to 19.9. So that is, and if you look at the collection efficiency also in microfinance, you look at 97.9 to March to about 90. So you are actually improving.
Sure. And secondly, sir, in the OPEX line item, there is a separate line item of around 30 crores that you have given. By the name of. Can you tell us what is that OPEX which you have segregated it separately in the OPEX line item? What is the nature of that operating expenses?
Hi, Murli here. See, we have two lines of business here. One is prepaid cards, another is micro ATM. Okay. What happens here is you tie up with, say, for example, let me talk about first micro ATM. We have 10 partners. And out of that, 2 of them contribute to 70% of the business. Assume that partner's name is X. You enter into an agreement with them where you land up in doing a revenue sharing basis. So out of revenue sharing, what happens in some cases it will be 80-20, some it will be 85-15, some it will be 90-10. So the switching cost is two things. One is in all the office transactions, what happens through these points A, and their transaction cost which is agreed, both are factored here. So this is what is switching costs which we are talking about, prepaid card business and micro ATM business. In prepaid card business, we have 9 partners, but one partner contributes to 99% of our business. So which means, I don't want to name the partner here, it's too open a forum. So there we did say something close to 760 crores of throughput last year. So in that revenue basis, approximately 86% of the revenue goes to that fintech partner and 14 comes to us. This we have been doing it for last 2 years, and last year we scaled up big time on prepaid business through focus segment. Similarly, on micro ATMs, we expanded the spread through 2 of our partners. So now we are the second largest, in fact, micro ATM in terms of SFB space. So we have close to 9 partners, and out of the 2 partners, as I said, contributes to 85% of the business. Here we land up in paying switching fee where people come and swipe on those machines, that interchange revenue what you make, in that spread is again 85-15. So these are the 2 costs. So this has a lead lag effect of 1 or 2 months based on this month transaction. After 40 days, it comes for billing, and so it's booked as revenue on one side, and post 45 days or 60 days, it's booked back as an expense at the ratio of 85-15. Am I clear?
Sure. So just to clarify, so you may be getting a revenue of 100 rupees, 85 rupees is booked in as a cost.
Correct.
In your P&L.
Correct.
So net there is
so more the transaction. So don't get misguided by seeing the transaction cost going up. If you see transaction cost is going up, the biggest positivity is number of transactions have gone up.
Sure.
This is a paisa business. I hope you are getting my logic. 85 remains the same. So we have now started doing, as I said, 700. This year we should close to 1,000 crores. So this is a growing business line. As the business action, unless you go and renegotiate and bring the ratio down, which is too early for us at this point of time.
Sure. And so in this business, there is no capital required, right? It's a completely fee-based.
Nothing, no capital required. You are only facilitating. Very simple, as simple as bank identification number. Yeah. Rohit wants to answer.
Hi, Hitesh. Rohit back here. So, see, your observation on the PAR data being slightly worse is correct. There is some stress in the microfinance book. I'm not saying at all that the stress has gone away. What I'm trying to tell you is that the last quarter, we saw a fabulous improvement in the way collections were happening and the way we were coming back. But yes, there is some stress. In specific areas, we do have some stress in the microfinance book.
Sure. Understood. And then lastly, the mutual fund AUM number, though it is a very small contributor to our P&L, has actually declined sequentially. What is the reason for that?
See, for us, last year key theme was protection. There are 2 things. We were ramping up our NTB numbers in terms of getting the quality customers in, which we have succeeded. We got the high variant customers in. Now this year the focus will be on building up investment-based AUM. So last year we focused on protection-based AUM because 2 reasons. One is our RMs couldn't do face-to-face meeting, and digitally we were ready through the protection plans. 100% of the policies which we sold, whether it's LI, GI or HI, is through digital. So this year we are getting into the mode of selling investment proposition. And for your information, we have now created a digital platform beyond in our mobile app as well as internet banking, which is an integrated proposition where you can do risk assessment and goal identification and asset allocation online. So this was not ready last year. So this year you will see a slight movement up there.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. That's it from my side.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Deepak Poddar from Sapphire Capital. Please go ahead. Deepak, your line is in talk mode. You can go ahead, please.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Hello.
You too.
We can hear you, Deepak. You can go ahead. Deepak, you would need to speak a little louder, please. We are not able to hear you clearly.
Hello. Hello.
Yes.
So we are not able to hear you too.
Hello.
As we are not able to hear the current participant, we'll move to the next question, which is from the line of Deepan Sankara from Trustline TMS. Please go ahead.
Thanks a lot for the opportunity and congrats for good set of numbers. Wanted to understand why this disbursements to NBFC segment has reduced substantially QRQ and year-on-year.
Good evening. This is Ram. I head the corporate banking. See, last year, as all of you know, that there has been a large impact at the borrower level, and we wanted to be largely cautious with the NBFC sector. So even otherwise, while we have been very clear about what sort of a credit rating we will take, last year we tightened our norms in terms of not only credit rating, but also in terms of their asset liability mismatch and things like that. So because of which, we were very cautious in terms of further disbursements unless they meet our stringent credit parameters. So that is the reason the requirement, I think in terms of the disbursement did not go up. And you also would know that our collection efficiency is almost closer to around 100%, 9.57, right? I think I've not had any, or most of them are zero DPDs. So while we were cautious, we are also very clear about our credit quality. That is the reason.
Okay, so is it due to any specific sector-based NBFCs or across the board we have taken these processes?
No, basically we have three types of segments we address. One is MFI, second is asset NBFCs, and third is HFCs. And it independent of which sector they are in, we were clear about our credit requirement, and on that basis we disburse. It is not about any specific sector as MFI or asset NBFCs or HFCs.
Okay. Sure, sir. Thanks a lot and all.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Abhijit Sakre from Kotak Securities. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thanks. First question on the MFI side of things. In one of the slides, you showed that the ticket sizes have now started to go up from 20,000 to now touching 30,000. So just want to understand the thought process there. And the related one is the overall sort of discussion on the harmonization for the MFI industry as such. So what are the broad thoughts around that as well?
Yeah, Dheeraj here. On the MFI ticket size, why you have seen an increase is largely because during the last year, our focus was to look at existing customers whose loan cycles were getting matured. So usually, I don't know if you know this, but prior to the pandemic, about 70% of our business used to be new to bank. And now with the pandemic, that number has actually gone down. So we've now focused on existing customers whose 2-year loans are getting matured, and those customers we have renewed their loans. So when they move from the first cycle to a second cycle or second to third, the disbursement or the loan goes up. So we may start with 27,000 rupees, but second cycle is 35, then 40. So the reason why you saw the average ticket size increase is because more than 50% of our loans, fresh loans, have gone to customers who have moved from one cycle to the next. I'll give it to Vasu.
Yeah, on the harmonization part of it, so RBI has announced that they will come with some guidelines. So we are in touch with them, and a draft guideline I think should be coming out at some point in time, and then a final guideline may be subsequent to that. But conceptually, yeah, I think that's exactly what actually we have been pushing for a long time now, because the borrower is the same, whoever be the format of the lender, borrower is the same. So unless there is a certain level of uniformity in terms of how do we assess the credit worthiness and how much do we give per borrower, unless there is a uniformity, it could always lead to stress at level. So I think harmonization is a good thing to happen, and we should await details from RBI shortly.
So just to follow up on that one, do you expect it to be disruptive in any which ways for SFBs as such?
Well, I don't think so, because see, even without a regulatory harmonization, we do have we have the MFIN, and most of us, I think, most of the SFBs, or maybe all the SFBs, are signatories to some code of conduct at the industry level. So as it is, most of us follow some form of rule. I mean, I wouldn't say that all of us follow exactly the same rule, but I think we all follow some level of prudent rules. So whenever the harmonization comes, I am not sure, I don't think it will be dramatically different from what we do now. So I think it should be more or less in line with what we are doing. But it will just ensure that a few rough edges here and there get ironed out. I think that's what it will really achieve from the SFB perspective. But if you look at the bank perspective, yes, that could be a little bit a larger impact, because some of the banks are not even signatories to that code. So we have really no idea what's happening at that in those banks. So we really won't be able to comment on that. But as far as SFBs are concerned, most of us follow some level of prudence already as it is.
Sure. Second question was on the liabilities side of it. So given the strong traction on the savings account side, obviously the average balances have started to go up quite a lot. But when I look at that pie chart with the mix of ticket sizes, it still seems to be a very bulky book. So at what point of time would you start worrying about starting to make it a little more granular, or probably start reducing the rates just to test the book out there, or at least establish the stickiness of the customer on that book?
Yeah, good question. See, already we have done that. Commencing April, we are holding 7% only up to 2 crore. Greater than 2 crore, it is brought down. A. B. Now what's happening is, in the bulk book, we are also having ultra HNIs also who have moved in, and few of the ultra HNI family account and trust accounts have also come in, thanks to the fixed income securities and debt market people who are seeing this as an attractive proposition. So it is not only institutional money which we have ultra HNIs money also. But over a period of time, we want to see that, like how we reduced the bulk dependency on TD, we are in that direction to bring down the bulk dependency on SA also. Presently, we have 50-55% or close to 60% retail, 40% on bulk there. We will end up in another, say, 6 months, 8 months time, incrementally, another 10 percentage more. There is 70% of absolute retail that's happening from that perspective.
Sure. Just one final one. Do we engage with any sort of agencies or third parties to source these deposits? How do they come through in such huge numbers?
It's a hard-working job from the front end, from using the physical, that is phygital mode. So HNIs and ultra HNIs and middle class come through phygital mode. That is physical plus branch and leveraging on digital. And which I call it as a mass account, less than 1 lakh or less than 50,000, it comes through the digital mode. So it's directly door to door. We have an organized database through which we work, and we have a catchment approach to get HNI and ultra HNI as a conscious activity. And we don't have any DSA or outsourced arrangement to source these. On digital side, we have recently got into a fintech tie-up to leverage on their customers to sell our savings account or FD product. We have Grow, who will use our FD as an asset allocation. Then we are tied up with Neo, who will go and get me accounts for their wealth management customer, our savings account. So these are the two fintech partners. This is for the mass segment.
Got it. Great. Thanks a lot and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. We would request the participants to please limit your questions to 2 per participant. The next question is from the line of Aman Ahluwalia from Laburnum Capital. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. 2 questions. One, just a follow-up on the new MFI, the sort of harmonization guidelines. So as I understand it, one of the things they've proposed over there is a 10% cap on the spread, which currently applies to to NBFC MFIs, but not to banks. In the event that were to come in, would that immediately sort of compress our yield on funds? And what do you think that does to us and to the competitive dynamic between us and the NBFCs? Would you see certain types of borrowers gravitate, maybe the more creditworthy ones gravitate to the SFBs, and the NBFC MFIs take the higher risk borrowers? But just curious to see if that 10% cap is brought in. There's clearly a headline level impact on yields. I'm wondering if there's anything that could offset it. Secondly, in terms of the just the evolution on the cost to income ratio, costs went up quite a bit this year on a year-on-year basis, and I think you attributed maybe some of that to the pandemic. I'm just curious, in what respects does the pandemic elevate operating costs? And finally, in terms of the regulatory issues surrounding the SFB and the HoldCo, it seems that there are 2. There's obviously the issue of whether the RBI will accept the recommendation of the interim working group and allow for a straight exit without meeting an intermediate threshold, and the issue of SEBI being willing to exempt from the promoter lock-in. So if we assume that RBI gives the approval but SEBI does not, is it fair to say that you will then just start the process, wait till October 23 and then merge the HoldCo and the bank? And if neither of them approve it, will the preference be to dilute at the HoldCo level via acquisition, or to actually sell a stake in the SFB and raise cash at the HoldCo level?
So on the first point, in terms of margin cap, the 10% cap which is applicable for an NBFC MFI, I think it's a good enough cap for SFBs or banks also. Only thing is that you have to figure out what is your cost of funds. For an MFI, the cost of funds is actually the rate at which they borrow from the bank. There is no other cost to them. For a bank, the cost of funds is basically your deposit cost, and then you have to add your reserves cost, SLR, CRR, and then you have to add the cost of raising the money, deposits through your branches and branch banking. So if you kind of take into account all of this cost and arrive at your actual cost of funds, then you apply a 10% margin on top of that, I think that's fair enough. I don't see any issue on that.
Will the RBI look at it that way, or will they just say, no, take your headline cost of funds?
No, I mean, see, cost of funds is cost of funds. You have to, cost of funds will not be defined like that. If you look at the MCLR formula given by RBI earlier for pricing a loan, marginal cost-based lending rate structure which RBI has given to banks, even in that cost of funds, they have taken the cost of deposit as well as your SLR CRR cost, and then the margin includes the return on equity. So they are fairly clear. I don't see any issue on that, and we are also in dialogue with them anyway, and so let's see what comes out finally, but I think this is fairly reasonable to expect. That's the first point, and the last point is that yes, if RBI approves the merger, then we will definitely have to reach out to SEBI for that 3-year exemption, and if they give it, then we'll be able to do it quickly. And if that doesn't come through, then we may still complete the entire merger process and make the effective date as October 23 or something like that. But that's a bridge that we have to cross only at that point in time. So first our job is to get the RBI approval and then reach out to SEBI. On the second thing, I'll ask Sridhar to answer.
Yeah. Thank you. Sridhar here. See, with regard to the OPEX cost, if you look at, there are fixed costs and variable costs. Like employee cost, rent, all these things are fixed costs. Close to around 70% is a fixed cost. Whereas the variable cost, which is in proportion to the business, close to 25 to 30%, no, that varies actually. There are some semi-fixed, semi-variable sort of thing. So in the pandemic, this 25 to 30% of the cost, no, it would have come, it generally would have come down. Other the fixed cost remain the same.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Shripal Doshi from Equirus Securities. Please go ahead.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. So my question is on our strategy or thought process on how do we see the loan book mix changing, and the related question is how do we see the NIM sort of ranging depending, as you said, depending upon the microfinance portfolio, which is having a very high sensitivity on the NIM. So that's the question that I have.
Okay. So in terms of the product mix, I think we are fairly reached the kind of our destination product mix level. MFI, we have always been saying that, MFI, we would like to stabilize it and see it at around the 15-17% level, and it's currently at about 18%. And the remaining, small business loan 40 to 45, commercial vehicle around 25, and the remaining being SME and NBFC lending. So I think we are more or less at our steady state product mix, and our affordable housing is something we started about a year back. So that's starting to contribute. And then there are a few supplementary products like used car we started, that's starting to contribute. But these are all supplementary or, kind of product extensions that will keep happening. Gold loan is other thing. But otherwise, we are not really looking to launch any new product, new vertical as such, because we are fairly comfortable with the product mix that we have today. And so given that, I think the NIM should probably stabilize maybe in a couple of quarters from today. We might see that the product mix is more or less becoming stable, which would then mean that the NIMs, everything else also should be close to the stability level.
Right. So then is it fair to assume that the NIM would range, say, between 8.5 to 9% sort of a number?
Well, I'm not giving you a guidance on that, but I think in a couple of quarters we should see them stabilizing. Because as I said, our product mix is very, very close to our destination level.
Okay. And sir, the second question was with respect to, I just saw an article wherein we have started a hospital also. So, and it sort of said that it's a venture that we are entering into. So is that a strategy that we are venturing in that segment, or what is it like?
Yeah, so that is part of our CSR. So we contribute. We have a trust called Equitas Healthcare Foundation. So that's the CSR activity. It's part of our CSR contributions, and that is jointly with Sringeri Sarada Math. They have joined with us to get this project going, and we are also in touch with other potential foundations across the country to try and support us in that project. So it's basically part of our CSR.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. All other questions have been answered.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Abhishek Murarka from IIFL Capital. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, hi. Congratulations for the quarter. So 2 or 3 questions. The first thing is, I know, you've given a lot of clarification on the SAR rates, but I just wanted to know, how do you monitor the stickiness of these retail SAR customers, and what will give you comfort to drop rates? We've seen a couple of other competitors dropping rates even in the retail segment, right? Not just the bulk. So just wanted to know how your strategy will work over there. And I'll just come to my next question after this.
So we track customers based on primary, active, and product holding. These are the 3 parameters in which you calibrate, measure, and monitor. So when I say primary are those customers who maintain balance and who transact with you. So these are the customers where you look for the next product selling. So that is one part happening. Second part that's happening is people who doesn't maintain balance but use your platform for transaction closer to A and B. These are the people where you dedicate a RM, make them start maintaining A and B, and then start selling the second product. And third are those products who will just use your platform only for transaction. Let us not talk about this. So less than 1 lakh customers, we are seeing they are getting closer to 1 lakh as aspiration. If you see quarter on quarter, presently we have reached our book size of 75,000 rupees as average balance, which was 48, 49. Before that it was 36. So steady build-up of retail customers are happening, and we are transacting and building balances. So how do we manage? Second part of yours is when do we drop rate? See, most of the banks drop rate after reaching a critical value in terms of SAR. For example, one of the big private banks went up to 1 lakh crore of SAR before dropping from 6 to say 4. For example, another bank which was at 7% raised up to 50-60,000 crores of SAR and accumulated close to 2.5 million of customers, then dropped it by 100 basis points.
Right.
So definitely headroom for us to reach. We are just now 5,000 crore. Okay, till 10,000 crore, I'm sure you will also accept. We need to get getting good customers in, making them transact. The biggest viability here is how fast you cross-sell the second product, how active you keep them, so that you make transaction and cross-sell revenue. I think that is one thing which is happening. What you can reflect there is number of insurance policies sold last year reached up to 1 lakh. So these are all is a byproduct. Only if a customer keeps balance, transact, I can do a cross-sell. So we are on the right direction towards that. So this year at the beginning, we have dropped the bulk rate above SAR for 6%. That is any amount above 2 crore and up to 50 crore, we have already made it to 6% proactively to keep the cost under check. And in the metrics level, we are at 65-66% of retail as it's shown in the chart, or close to 70%. Of SAR is less than or on the retail bucket, 30% is on bulk. That will automatically calibrate when this rate drop.
Okay. And safe to assume that all these cross-sell numbers, so MF cross-sell or insurance cross-sell, that is largely to own customers, your liability customers.
Yeah, only if you have liability savings account, we do all these products. We don't do standalone for anyone, either an investment or insurance at all, because it is linked into the savings account.
Okay, great. That's clear. The second question is, so if we think about just your customer segment, chances are that over the last 1 year they have eaten into their savings, and they are probably one medical exigency away from probably getting into a overdue or NPA situation. Would you not then think about increasing your provision buffers, or is that not the case and you think your customer profile has enough savings to actually, let's say, go through a second wave without getting impacted? How are you thinking about provision in this respect?
Yeah, I think we mentioned that a little bit earlier also. See, basically under IRAC norms, you can't create a general pool of provision and just keep it on top of your portfolio. That's not permitted. So you have to create a specific account to its provision. And so which is what exactly we did in December. We increased the level of provision in each of the buckets of NPA, each of the slabs of NPA. We increase the level of provision so that we can have a higher level of provisions built in against the book, against the stress book. So having said that, so we will keep watching and monitoring the scenario, and we'll have to see how the first quarter goes. And based on how the first quarter goes, we'll have to see what level of potential stress that might come up in the subsequent quarters, and also whether RBI will come back like last year, whether they'll come back with a one-time permission to the banks to create a general provision. So if this too happens, we'll definitely be looking at it. So so that's something that we'll have to just see and take it as it comes.
Okay. And just finally, couple of data, keeping questions. One, could you share the transfer pricing that you have for your asset verticals? And also, if you could give the blended yield for the new vehicle and the used vehicle book.
Okay, so on the transfer pricing and the internal ROAs and ROEs, product-wise and all that, we don't share that publicly because it has a certain sensitivity around that. So I'm sorry that we will not be able to share that. But in terms of yield on new and used, I think it must be there somewhere. If it is not there, then what we will do is when we upload the minutes of this con call in the website, we'll ensure that we add the data into that.
Okay, sure. Sure, thanks Vasu and all the best.
Thank you. So with that, I think we should come to an end of this con call. And before you all drop off the line, just hold on for a minute. I have one last small piece of message to communicate. Two things. One is that equitas is a Latin word, and equitas in Latin means equitable. Equitable means being fair and transparent. So one is that as an organization, right from 2007, we are always committed to being absolutely fair and totally transparent. So you should never find anything in us which you think is a little doubtful or something. And if any of you find anything which doesn't look right, doesn't look fair, or doesn't look transparent, you have every right to demand from us whatever that looks wrong, and we have a duty to ensure that we clarify that very properly and publicly. So that is one thing which I wanted to communicate. Second thing is that as a management, you all know that we are always extremely prudent and very conservative in the way we do the business. And so that is something that will continue to guide us, and it's all the more required in times like this. And so we will continue to be very cautious, very conservative, and very prudent in whatever we do. Our first focus will be our staff, second focus will be our collections, and third focus will be our business. So our focus will remain in that order, and so we will have to see how the second wave goes, but clearly we will continue to be following the same method of conservative approach that we adopted all these years. Thank you very much, and wish all of you all the very best. Bye-bye.
Thank you. On behalf of Equitas Small Finance Bank Limited, we conclude today's meeting. Thank you for joining us, and you may now disconnect your line.